But now it's time to cross to the Today program for a special coverage, and Steve Liebmann and Ali Moore. Steve?
Oh, there's another one. Another plane just hit.
Up there, yeah. Now remember, oh my God.
The world is in shock this morning after terrorists launched an unprecedented series of attacks on the United States. Good morning and welcome to this special edition of the Today program. No official death toll's been established and probably won't be known at least until tomorrow at the earliest. But it's believed there could be thousands of people dead.
It began with 2 commercial passenger planes crashing into New York's World Trade Center. 50,000 workers were inside the Twin Towers at the time. Both buildings had been completely destroyed.
That was followed by terrorists crashing another commercial airplane, 2 in fact, one of them into the Pentagon, the home of the American military in Washington, D.C. It is, to say the least, it has been an extraordinary chain of events overnight. And around Australia, Australians are waking up to the news of what has happened these past 7 hours in the United States. We've been up watching events as they've stunningly unfolded, numbingly unfolded.
The sense of disbelief does not change. The more you watch this, the more questions there are and the more extraordinary it appears.
The United States, in fact, has been locked down. The Federal Aviation Authority has shut all airports in the United States. There are no commercial aircraft flying.
For at least 24 hours.
That's right. And in fact, probably the only aircraft in the air at the moment is Air Force One, carrying President George Bush. He was in Florida, in fact, when the first of the attacks occurred in New York City. The second, there was just 18 minutes between the 2 attacks on the Twin Towers.
And it was just about an hour later that there was the attack on the Pentagon.
Yeah, and the president is somewhere in the air. Where, we're not sure. Throughout our morning, we'll be crossing to our correspondents around the world for worldwide reaction to what has gone on in New York. The first of our reports this morning comes from the 9 Network's US correspondent, Robert Penfold. He's filed this one.
One is the one world.
The day of terror and chaos right across the United States began with an attack on New York's tallest building, the famous World Trade Center. It was timed to create the maximum number of casualties. Just before 9 a.m., 11 p.m. on the east coast of Australia, the start of the workday in New York, a hijacked passenger plane, a Boeing 767, ploughed into the side of the skyscraper.
Move it! Come on!
Then, soon after, the horror continued. A second hijacked passenger aircraft, a Boeing 757, appeared low over New York. As far as authorities know, the terrorists on board had taken the controls of both planes. While the rescue operation was just getting underway below, this aircraft too was flown straight into the second tower of the 110-story building. Were hijacked and eventually crashed. An American Airlines 767 flight flying from Dallas near Washington to Los Angeles. Another American Airlines 757 flying from Boston to Los Angeles. A United Airlines 767 bound from Boston to Los Angeles, and a United Airlines 757 from Newark, near New York, to San Francisco.
Well, the 9 Network's correspondent Michael Usher is in the Big Apple in New York, the scene of that initial World Trade Center attack, and Michael Usher joins us now. Michael, America really is at war.
Yeah, Steve, it's just extraordinary. They have shut down so many services here all around the country. The president, in fact, we were just told, I know there's been some talk of him still being in the air. We just heard that the President George W. Bush has landed and is in a secure place, they say, in Omaha, Nebraska. But across the country, federal buildings are being shut down. Theme parks, Disneyland has closed all of its theme parks. They're just not taking any chances here. And as you heard Rob say, the airport system, they've all shut down until at least noon tomorrow, we're told. Canadian airports have closed. It's simply an astonishing state of affairs here.
Michael, where were you when the first plane crashed into Tower Number 1?
I was just about to jump on a plane, believe it or not, Steve. We were at JFK Airport when we got a very quick call saying, get off, don't get on board that plane. We jumped a taxi. We then got on the expressways and, of course, got stuck in all that traffic. It is incredible. Manhattan Island simply shut down.
We'll be back with you in the course of our special Today program this morning, but for now, thanks for joining us, Mike.
Thanks, Steve.
Well, speaking from Washington, where he had been meeting with US President George Bush, Prime Minister John Howard has warned Australia to brace for news of Australian casualties from the attacks. This is an edited version of a statement he gave a short time ago.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a very tragic day in the history of a great nation. Words always do fail you on an occasion like this.
And that's Prime Minister John Howard speaking in Washington.
A very emotional Prime
Indeed.
Minister too.
Just a short time ago, Nine correspondent Nigel Blunden has been travelling with Prime Minister John Howard in the United States, and he has prepared this report. Nigel, thanks for joining us from Washington. Where was Prime Minister Howard when the first of the attacks occurred?
Steve, that was just prior to Mr. Howard addressing the Australian media, largely on domestic issues, on the Tampa crisis back home. Just minutes before a scheduled press conference, he heard news and then saw the pictures of the first attack on the World Trade Center. And during a 10-12-minute press conference, speaking in Washington at a hotel just a couple of hundred yards from the White House, was the attack in Washington on the Pentagon. And by the time he'd finished, you could see the smoke billowing from the Pentagon itself. Clearly, Mr. Howard was quite shaken initially. It's an eerie feeling in Washington. The streets that are normally so busy at this time of day are deserted as people come to terms with the shock, and the shock that's now starting to turn to anger.